Thank you, Astrid. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for putting this webinar. It is a very interesting topic. I also want to congratulate the panelists who came before me for putting some very interesting issues on the table. And I will try to share with you the World Bank experiences, what it has meant in terms of urbanization, and what we are trying to focus on to unleash the urbanization opportunity for Africa. But usually the bank tries to develop analytical framework, and I will just, for the purpose of free flow of the discussion, I will not follow it strictly, because in urban setting, we have sort of put constraints into 4 key buckets. The first bucket is to do with institutional and regulatory aspect. The second one is to do with the infrastructure and access to land for infrastructure in the urban setting. And the third to do with skills and innovation. And then the last to do with financing. So inherently, when you talk of any urbanization situation in Africa, you will find that you encounter one or all of these 4 issues put in the 4 buckets. However, I want to begin from maybe where Gilbert has stopped. That I think when African governments adopted decentralization, the assumption was that when you decentralize, you take decision closer to the people, you empower them, there will be improved service delivery, there will be transparency, and there will be accountability. Now, the question at the end of the day is, for most African countries that have been implementing decentralization over a couple of decades, have these assumptions been realized? And if the answer is no, why was it not achieved? And to me, the underpinning issue is to really to understand the political economy. Gilbert has talked about the political economy. It seems Zambia is still at an early stage of decentralization, and the type of concerns and worries he has talked about will be real, because decentralization brings with it tensions between the center and the periphery in terms of the local government. People are going to lose power, people are going to lose resources, and when the realization dawns on them, they are going to fight back. And the fight will manifest itself in many forms. In the case of Uganda, we saw proliferation of local governments. Districts which used to be bigger than parliamentary constituencies have been subdivided into smaller units, same size now with the constituencies. On-source revenue has been depleted. When you talk of motor vehicle licenses being devolved, you should realize that both the central government and the local government are fishing from the same pond as far as revenue is concerned. So there's going to be tension, but those who succeed will be only how they have managed the tension between the center and the local government. So I think that is one lesson which is coming out in our operations involvement in the center. When you talk of intergovernmental fiscal transfer, you can provide a figure 5%, 7% of locally generated revenue to be given to local government, but you still find that the center will retain the bulk of that money with the pretext of being able to supply local government with things which are centrally procured. So the political economy and decentralization is key. We need to understand it very well. The second point I want to comment on is urbanization and financing. Now, if you look very carefully in the Africa decentralization policy, it has three elements. It has fiscal decentralization, administrative decentralization, and then political decentralization. Now, in most cases, the administrative and political decentralization seem to be doing very well. It seems to succeed. Local governments are allowed to elect their councillors through adult suffrage. In some cases, to a large extent, you allow local governments to recruit its own staff, the civil service. But when it comes to fiscal decentralization, the financing of the local government activities which have been devolved, that is when you start running into challenges. And people talk a lot about innovative ways of financing local government. Basically, I can group them in 4 buckets. One is the local government should be able to generate its own source revenue. The second one is the intergovernmental fiscal transfer. You need to understand the sharing arrangement between revenue which have been collected at the center to finance services at the local government. How is that done? And then you can talk of public-private partnership, attracting resources, financing from the private sector. And then lastly, you can consider local government going to the financial markets and borrowing, either bonds or other source of funding from the financial market. Now, all those sound so nice, but when you come to the reality of it, they are not simple. On source revenue, you will find that the central government tends to assign nuisance revenue sources to local government. Those are sources of revenue which are very difficult to collect, do not yield a lot of revenue. Intergovernmental fiscal transfer, well, the central government can give a lot of money to local government, but these monies could be extended as conditional transfers. And it will greatly undermine the ability of local governments to use its discretion to respond to the local needs. And when you come to public-private partnership, I have gone to many cities in Africa, and if you ask them one question, I have $5 million, where can I invest? And how long will it take me to recover my investment? You will get no answer. So all these cities, they talk of attracting PPP. In reality, they are not well prepared. They have no clue whatsoever why a private sector should bring its capital and invest. A private sector, first and foremost, will bring its money when it knows it is going to recover its money within the shortest possible time and with profit. It is not going to invest in capital investment, which is not going to yield returns. So I think cities need to start thinking like business corporation. They need to start looking at private sector differently, because a private sector will bring its capital when it is sure that it is going to recover the investment plus some returns. Now, in the financial market, there are a number of issues. We have done some AAA rating for some cities in Africa, but we found that they could not go far because of a number of issues. One, the legislative framework maybe do not allow them to go for long-term financing. For example, we did AAA rating for Kampala City. National Social Security Fund was willing to extend funding to buy the city bond. But the law put a cap that any subnational should not borrow more than 20% of its previous own source revenue. Now, that was very unfortunate because it means the city could not borrow for long-term financing. Instead of looking at the ability of the city to pay or borrow equivalent for its 10 years previous own source revenue, the law was limiting it only for 20% of the previous year. So I think there are a lot of challenges which these urban areas or cities are facing. Now, my colleague Gertrude talked of the Uganda law equating a city to a district. And I think this is one of the most unfortunate things because over the years, or people who have been in cities, you know quite well that the type of infrastructure provided at city level is completely different from the type of infrastructure provided at a district rural local government. The investment in cities or urban areas tend to be very lumpy. They require large amounts of money upfront, while service delivery at rural areas tend to be point sources and can be financed at a reasonably lower unit cost. So I think it is not appropriate to equate a city to a district. And among the development partners in Uganda, we are currently having debate with government to revisit that policy and revisit the consideration. Lastly, all the panelists have talked about the challenge of institutional capacity. And we have been involved in capacity building in subnational government for a very long period of time. I think we started involving in the late 90s. And over the years, we have got some very good experience. Now, over the years, we discovered that in order to strengthen the institutional capacity for cities or for urban centers, you need to approach it from an holistic point of view. You cannot do training of staff only because you train them very well, the working environment is not conducive, they're going to move on. So now what we're trying to do in all our programs in Africa is to look at institutional strengthening from 3 dimensions. We look at the systems. What type of system do we need to put in place to make the urban institution functional? The second one is to do skilling for the staff itself. We are in a period where technology is advancing very rapidly. So the staff needs to be skilled to be able to cope up with the new technology and new ideas. And then the third is you need to provide the necessary tools, because it doesn't make any sense to train an engineer and you do not provide the necessary equipment and tools to make the engineer perform his duties or to make the planner perform his duties.